Okay, and I think we can start.
Yes, Jan, I like to say a few words before you start. My dear colleagues, dear students, we have a very distinguished guest tonight. He's Jan Gehl from Denmark, an architect, an urban planner. A few titles to describe him. He co-founded Gehl Architects, and he's currently a senior advisor at Gehl Architects. He continues his research and his practice. Last time we talked, he told us that he was at Denmark Harbor in wet water, in boots. So he's getting on with his work. He has written quite a few books. The first of which that I have got to know him was Life Between Buildings, which came out in 1971. And at that time, I was a student of architecture. It was wonderful to get hold of that book. Cities for People, New City Spaces, Public Life, People Cities are a few to name. His books have given me a lot of inspiration, and I look upon his work as one of the classics for not only for professionals, for students, and for anyone, for the interested parties. And he touches, in my opinion, to the needs of people, and not people in groups or individuals, but everyone. Anything that shapes our lives and shapes our cities are present in his works. These are my insights to his work. And once again, I will say that we are very honored to have you here, to host you here tonight at BAU Archie Talks. And I don't want to go on more. Now the stage is yours. After you finish, I'm sure students will be asking you questions, and we may have a few questions too. So it's all yours, Jan. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to have this opportunity to speak to you in Turkey and in Istanbul, where I have actually been invited to come to Istanbul at some point when the coast is clear for COVID or something. But I will come and I will visit you in person, and I look forward to this. And the occasion is that my book, Cities for People, now as a first book of mine, has been published in Turkey. And today I'm especially very, very happy because today we published a new book, which is called The Human Dimension. It's in Danish, and it's my book number 100, because I knew that when the Turkish book came out, it was 99 book, but now we have today turned 100 books in various languages, where I am the author. So I look forward. This describes the 50 years from I published my first book, Life Between Buildings, 50 years ago exactly, until today. What was the situation, why we had to make this revolt against modernism in 1971, and what has happened after this book, and also a book from my wife about psychological aspects of housing. These two books are republished here with new articles about what happened before, what happened after. So this is a great day, number 100. But I think that we should go and talk about some more general stuff. And I have prepared a lecture for you, and I will start it now. I will start to share the screen and get the lecture going. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
You can hear me and you can see it?
Yes, we can perfectly see it and hear you. Yes.
We are off. Here we go. I'm going to talk today about livable cities for the 21st century. I'm going to talk about exactly the 50 years since my first book came out, what has happened in this period, and this has led to the phenomena livable cities, cities with equality for people. There has been, before I wrote the first book, there has been the beginning of a big problem which actually have carried on into the years after 1971. But for 50 years, we have done all we could to make the cities uninviting and to chase the people out of our cities. We've had for a long time two absolutely dominating planning paradigms, the modernism and the car invasion. If we go back to maybe before the Second World War, I would say we had the good old days. In the good old days, all the cities all over the world, they looked like this. They were not too high, the dimensions were small, and they were actually built for Homo sapiens. They were built by people, for people, and they were quite comfortable, and we all had a good time in this scale of city. What was characteristic of the cities before the modernism was the fact that all the cities were built around spaces. Everything happening in cities were going on in the spaces. In the spaces, people met. That was where you had the market, where you have met your fellow citizens. That's where you have the processions, the demonstrations. Everything in the city happened in spaces. In the old days, the cities were entirely made out of spaces. Spaces were the important element of the city. With the modernism, this was completely put upside down. Now they say the important thing in cities is not the spaces for people, but the buildings, the functions. And whatever is not built upon is not a space for people, it's a leftover space. And this is one of the early realistic cities. It is by Corbusier. It is years from Paris. He said to have a better city in Paris, you take everything down and build 24 high-rise buildings where you can sit and look out at the wonderful city of Paris. If we look at the old cities, this is Copenhagen actually, where I live and where I come from. We realize that we can remember all the spaces, we can remember all the streets and squares and parks, and then we can remember 2-3 buildings. The cathedral, the town hall, the castle, the parliament, a few buildings we can remember. And then all the spaces. If we look at the new cities like Dubai, we can remember no spaces because there are no spaces. But all we can remember from Dubai is a number of funny buildings which have been created in a great competition between architects who can make the most funny building. And there are many suggestions what a funny building could look like. The modernists, they said that the city is a machine. They defined that Homo sapiens was not relevant anymore. Now we will have to build for a new species called the modern man, and everything should be changed. Everything should be divided in functions. And also they were very influenced by the doctors, and they actually had this idea to spread out the cities for health reasons. But that health was something like tuberculosis and other bacteria diseases, but there's much more to health than fresh air. There's also psychological health, social health, how you are feeling, what your mood is, whether you are inspired, whether you can meet other people. All these other things were completely overlooked. Here they went for the tuberculosis, and they built all these buildings in that period. What the result of the modernism was really a goodbye to the concern for people and for social life, which were always present in the old cities. Now people moved around in leftover space. And also modernism meant a completely goodbye to the knowledge of good human scale. In the old days, everything was in human scale. Now the people were floating around in leftover space, completely out of scale to the human being and the human being's ability to move around and to use its senses, whatever. The other big change or paradigm in this period, in the past 60 years, had been the car invention, where after the Second World War at various times in history, in various parts of the world, but the automobile, they actually invaded our cities, and they chased the people away from the spaces which they always occupied, and then they were squeezed into small sidewalks or just squeezed. You can see all over the world that the people are treated very badly, whether it be Greece or China or Italy or Estonia. They are all examples that the priority has been to make the cars happy, and they forgot that it was really in the cities. Our main task is to make the people happy. People are treated badly in cities all over the world. In the western part of the world, or certainly here is also examples. Here's Bucharest and Romania, not a very good situation, but much more severe are all the problems in various cities, developing cities and cities with a growing economy. Here is from Dhaka in Bangladesh, completely mayhem. Another thing which happened with the introduction of the automobile was that, again, a new change of scale. In the old days, all cities were built to 5 kilometers an hour. Spaces were small. You could see the people. You could see everything close up. You could also see the mountains in the distance. But with the car, all the spaces became big. All the signs became very big. There were no details. You had no time to enjoy the details anymore. All these changes in scale made the architects and planners completely confused about scale. What is good scale? What is good human scale? I would say that in 1960 was really the year when modernism and motorism really took off and started to be a big problem. And we can ask ourselves what was known about quality for people in cities in 1960. And the answer is virtually nothing. Then there came a counter movement. And the first voice heard in this counter movement was the voice of the American journalist Jan Gehl, living in Greenwich Village and fighting the new plan for New York, which was roughly to take all the old stuff down and build a number of freeways and build high-rise along the freeways so that you could have a modern city. But Jan Gehl fought vigorously against this, say these old areas, they're not redundant, they're actually working excellently. And she wrote in this book, which has become the Bible of urban design, she wrote, if the modernists and the motorists are to plan our cities in the future, they will be dead cities and not live cities. This was really an important book, 1961. Just 2 years ago, I saw in Canada, where Jane Jacobs lived in her later days, I saw these posters. You can see that Jesus looks after the old times or the future, the behind, but Jane Jacobs really looks after the future. She's really worshipped as the godmother of urban design. I'll tell a little bit about my own story. I was graduated as an architect in 1960. I was in School of Architecture in the 50s. And what did we learn in the 50s in School of Architecture? We learned to be good modernists. All the time for 5 years, we were hanging over models and pushing objects around, the buildings around. And if it looked good from an aeroplane, it would be a lovely place to live. We were told that. We were also told that it doesn't matter what you make, because people will be so happy to have a place to live, and they will accommodate, they will be adaptable. So don't worry about how the built form influences the life. People will adapt. That was what we learned. And in my case, I rushed out of School of Architecture 1960 to realize all these wonderful modernistic things which will make people happy forever after. But then I married a psychologist. And then suddenly there was another discussion in our house. My wife and her colleagues, they all the time were saying, why are you architects not interested in people? Why don't they teach you anything about people in School of Architecture? Do you really think that aesthetics is the only thing which is important for people? Do you really think that your buildings is a matter of aesthetics? They influence people so very much. You're manipulating with people and you know nothing, which was true. In my case, I had to go back to School of Architecture to study for 40 more years. And I went back to be told, to find out why didn't they tell me anything first time I was in School of Architecture. Then I found out that nothing was known about how the built form influenced people's life. So I had to start studying from the very bottom. And the purpose of all this was to make the people visible in our planning so that we could take good care of people instead of taking care of buildings or automobiles. In my case, I used observation studies, and to make a summary, I just sat there for 40 years watching how people behaved, putting it together, finding the patterns so that I could find out what we can do better in architecture and urban design. I'll tell you two little stories, just two little studies. We did a lot of studies in a lot of countries, in Greenland and in Australia and South Africa, in Japan and China. In various cultures, in various climates, we found that all the places, they were Homo sapiens and they were behaving generally in the same way. Just to show you one example. This is the School of Architecture in Copenhagen. It moved to a new destination, and the dean called in a famous landscape architect and said, do some landscaping. And he made these wonderful lawns of grass with iron edge, as you have to do now. And this in the foreground is the corner. And the students arrive here at the corner. And in the background is the place where you can have coffee. And the moment the students see where you can have coffee, they go for the coffee. Man is a very energy conscious animal. He hates to waste energy, especially his own energy. So when students see where you can have coffee, they go for the coffee. The landscape architect thought they will go in a number of right angles down to the coffee, but that's not mankind. Man goes straight for where he has to go. Then 3 weeks later, the landscape architect had to come and finish his project. He's not finished it the first time. Now it is much more like people behave and not what the architect thought was a smart way of doing it. Here's another example. We have something called the edge effect. You can find it all over the world, that people love to stay out in the edge of spaces. If you only stand in the middle of spaces, if you are with somebody else, if you're talking or if you're doing something, when you just have to wait or to enjoy or sit down, you go to the edge. Why do you go to the edge? The edge is very comfortable. All your senses is in front of you. Sitting in the edge, you can follow everything happening in the space, and nobody starts to say, why is this guy standing there in the middle of nowhere? He goes out to the edge. So everybody goes out to the edge. We found that. And then we started to think, maybe architects are different than ordinary people. And then we decided to study this carefully. So we went to a number of architecture schools to see how architecture students behaved. And they behave exactly like ordinary people. They go out to the edge because all our senses are on the front side, and it's much more comfortable to be in the edge of a space. So architects are just like other people. And then you can start to wonder, who put up these things and who did you expect to sit there? I can give you a written guarantee that nobody in all will ever sit there unless they are desperately tired. That's not what people would like, where people would like to stay. They would like to stay in the edge. If you do these kind of things, maybe then bring some bronze people. If you don't bring bronze people, these places will never be used. So that's a good advice to you. I started to put all these things together, and then in 1971, I published my first batch of findings and data and thoughts in this little book, Life Between Buildings, which came out 50 years ago, but it took 16 years before it was published in English and started to be spread in the world. And we still have a Turkish version, which I hope will come one day. Much to my joy, I saw this little book being picked up all over the world. Especially, I was very happy that it was used very much in developing countries like Bangladesh, like Vietnam, like India, and so on. Later on, there were more books. And by now, I have this book, Cities for People, are published now in 36 languages. And actually, the 37th language is Turkish. And I'm very happy that this has happened. If we shall sum up after these years of research, I would say that there's been now made so much research that we know pretty much how we can make very good and comfortable cities for people. The human dimension of city planning and housing is well developed now. We know what we should do and can do. The problem is really to get this knowledge spread out and to get it widely used. If I should just go over some of the things, and that will only be very superficial because there are so many things we have found out in these 50 years. But we can sum up the thing about city planning that first we shape the cities, but then the cities shape us and shape our conditions for the quality of life. And there are a number of things you should observe, and here you can see them and you can find them again in my books. This overview of things. And that's about city planning, but it's important to realize that even these details and the single building has a great influence on behavior and on your well-being. You can make forbidding buildings which just signalize, go on, we don't want you here, or you can make buildings which invite you and which are welcoming and say so, where the message is, please stay around here if you like. One of the things we have found in our research is that there is much more to walking than walking. Walking is a way, man is a walking animal, and walking is a way we move from one place or the other. But you can never look at a great number of people walking and they say this must be a good city. A good city will have not only people walking, but what is really important is how many of those walking have stopped and started to enjoy. So it's really the activities which are not walking, which is interesting for quality in cities. We have over the years, maybe I can start here, that if you look at the finest public space in the world, that could be the Campo in Siena, fantastic public space. It's 800 years old, it works still fantastically. Is this a miracle or is it straightforward common sense? We made over the years a number of quality criteria. It's a list of 16 items, 12 items actually. And you can find it in this book, Cities for People, in the end chapter. And here I list a number of things you will have to look after to make a great place for people. The first thing has to do concerning protection against traffic, against fear, against unpleasant sense experience, too much wind or noise or smell, whatever. And then there is a number of issues concerning the comfort. It should be a fantastic place to walk, to stand, to stay, to sit. You should be able to see, to hear, and to talk to people, and to unfold and play. And then there are a number of things about enjoyment. The places should be in a good human scale. You should be possible for you to enjoy what part of the climates you really like. And finally, there should be aesthetic quality, positive sense experiences. There should be greenery and water and views to the mountain and beautiful architecture, fine materials, good details, good design. But it's important that all the other things are also important, maybe even more so. I know of places where all 11 of these are well observed, but the number 12 is not so, but still they work very well. But if you also can put all these things together with a great sense of quality and architectural quality, then you have the most wonderful space in the world. If we go back to the Campo in Siena and take this list along, you will come out not saying, yeah, but you will go and realize that each of these 12 things are brilliantly solved. All the things we can ask for is looked after in this. And when you came to number 12, aesthetic quality, you find that it is a beautiful square. It's got very fine materials, fine details, fine textures, and it's so well put together. And when you have all these things together in one place, it will become the most wonderful space in the world. It's not magic, it is common sense and logic if you think about it. We also found, of course, that if you observe these quality criteria, you have a much nicer city than if you don't. We found 2 modern squares, and the top one, they have overlooked all 12 quality criteria, and the only thing people do is they are running out of the space as fast as they can. In the lower space, people actually going through are stopping because it's so nice, they want to sit down and enjoy. And in this lower space, you have year-round 10 times more activity than in the other space, even if it's the same number of people who come to these two places every day. So what you do is very, very important for the life and the well-being in the city. While all this has been going on, there has been further changes to the program for good cities. Today, every mayor I know wants a lively, livable city. He knows he shall make a sustainable city. He is very, very concerned about making a healthy city. And then, of course, he shall make also a good city to be old in. We always knew we should make good cities to be children in, but now we have a lot of old people. We'll have to look into that. The first thing about lively and livable, that is very much what I call the human dimension. That is the age-old phenomena that the greatest interest of people is other people, and the greatest attraction in the cities are the other people. And the public spaces where you can meet your fellow citizens have always been an important element in human settlements. And that is still the case. If you wonder if it's still the case, just look at any perspective drawing made by my modern architect. He will fill his drawing with happy people doing all kinds of funny things to show that this is a very nice place. If it was not a very nice place, there would be no people there. They will have gone home long ago, and people will start to say, what's wrong with this place, since there's no life, no people. So we all put life in our drawings to show it's a good place, because people present means that it's a place of good quality. Also today, we have a strong urge to make cities much more sustainable. And we know that the more we walk and bicycle and use public transportation, the better for the climate. That is realized increasingly by now. And we had to do much more about it because we have been so focused on private mobility that we forgot about all the things which are much better for the climate. Another new thing which has come up is the sitting syndrome. And the doctors tell us now, you must make cities which invite people every day to move, to walk, to bicycle, and don't move more and sit less. That is the message now. And if we go to World Health Organization, they will say in their global action plan, introduce policies that promote active methods of traveling, such as walking and bicycling. So we have a strong urge here to do much more for people to move themselves instead of being moved. Finally, I mentioned that we have now in our cities an increasing number of elderly people, and we have to make much more aware that these people which are retired, they have maybe 15, 20 years where they would like to be part of society, and we have to make cities so that they will have a good time. We also always knew that we should do things so we're good for children, but actually my take on this is that you just make the cities good for people, and they will also be good for the elderly, and they will be good for the children. If you put people in focus, you will look into this problem also. If we look closer at these new demands, and then we look at these issues. So I would say that looking carefully after people in city planning will efficiently address these 4 issues. You'll have a more livable, lively city. You'll have a more sustainable city. The city will be more healthy, and it will be a good city to be old in. Now we can ask a question: are there cities who are actually inviting people to walk and bicycle as much as possible every day in their life, and not only in the weekends or in the holidays? Yes. Cities all over the world and cities of all sizes are to a high extent doing just this now, inviting people to walk and bicycle more. I could now go on to tell you about some of the work I've been involved in around the world, where the common thing is that all of them are very, very much interested in humanizing their city, in having a better quality for people in the city. One example could be Melbourne. I will not have much time to talk about Melbourne, but Melbourne has done a fantastic work of turning itself from a completely uninteresting American type business city, dead in the night, dead in the weekends, to a lively, vibrant city where people walk, where they have the widest sidewalk and the best sidewalk quality in the world and the best furniture. And it is like Paris, it's just a better climate. And if you don't know what to do, move to Melbourne. I could tell you about Sydney, where we worked actually for more than 15 years to make a better city. Sydney was famous for its waterfront, but the rest of the city center was really bad, full of cars and buses and fumes and noise. And we had great problems in pushing out the traffic. But by now it has succeeded. The first streets have been turned over to people and to light rail instead of noisy buses and private transportation. Fantastic. I could tell you about New York, where the mayor Michael Bloomberg, he wanted to have a much more sustainable policy. And he said, in this city, we walk and take the bike and take the metro. And then he set forth to do a big project to invite people to use the spaces more, to walk more, and to introduce bicycle lanes and so forth. Also, he wanted to make great public spaces, and we were in the position to find out that actually Broadway in New York, in Manhattan, was not necessary for traffic. Actually, traffic would be much better if there wasn't a Broadway. So we were able to close Broadway and make wonderful people spaces in Times Square, Herald Square, Union Square, Madison Square, all the places where Broadway was crossing the avenue. We could make wonderful people spaces which were filled with people and joy right away because there was such a need. Now they realized that this was a fantastic idea, and they had done this 50 other places all over New York. All the time they take the asphalt from the cars and give it to the people. You can see other interesting work, like the work in Colombia by Mayor RAIC Peñalosa, where all the sidewalks were full of parked cars and whatever, and they have been cleaned up and bicycle lanes have been introduced. You can see also in Bogota how they close most of the city every Sunday so that people can bicycle in the city. They say in the Sunday we don't use the streets so much, so we can close the streets and make it a city for people on the Sunday. That's a very, very exciting program, and that shows people how much joy you can have of bicycling in the city. I have one of the projects I've been involved in has been in Amman, and here is a square we created because this was an area where there were no spaces for people to go to have fresh air. Everything was occupied by cars and parking and traffic. And then we managed to do this square in front of this famous mosque. I'm very happy about this because this was in a district for really poor people who have no much other opportunities. All over the world they're doing this. This is a mayor in Vilnius who goes around and show people, do not park in my bike lanes. Very efficient. And this is from Bucharest, where now they've got my book, so I'm sure they'll soon sort out this little mess, no problem. Just read the book. And now I'll tell you about Moscow. I told about the other cities at a conference, and then this guy came galloping up to me and say, hey, we want to humanize Moscow. It should be very fast. When can you come? And I said, I can come on Monday. So we went straight away to Moscow, and we were absolutely shocked because Moscow was completely ruined by traffic. We had the saying that freedom from communism is a right to park everywhere. And that was really what you could in Moscow. People were parking on the sidewalks, in the parks and everywhere. This is one street. Here is a little residential street. Have a good time here. And here's the sidewalk of Main Street, Moscow, where of course they have used it for parking, and there were only 1 meter left for the people of Moscow who wanted to walk in the street and to use the main street. We were commissioned. First, they published all my books, and that was the city of Moscow who published the books. Then we were commissioned to make a plan to humanize Moscow very quickly. And in this process, I went to visit Mayor Sobyanin, and he asked, what will you criticize in your report? And I mentioned that parking on the sidewalks is not a very good idea, and pushing people out against the wall. People should have space, and the shops should have in front of them space for people to go and see the shops and whatever. So parking on the sidewalks is not a good idea. Now in Moscow, they have a very efficient democracy. So when I came back 3 months later, all the cars from the sidewalk on Main Street, Moscow, has disappeared, and a new life started to happen. If people forgot the new rules, the mayor had a little car which came around and picked up your car and took it to somewhere. And they were always very worried that they could not get the car back. Very efficient, and that was the beginning. But this was the beginning of a very great process of completely changing the face, the character of Moscow, from a car-infested city to much more of a people-oriented city. This is the situation before. A gray street has become now a green street. Instead of the cars on the sidewalk, you have benches. Instead of the air being full of advertisements, now you have greenery and a view to the Kremlin at the end of the street. This has been further developed. Other streets in the city center have completely changed. Look at the situation to the left, where people are being pushed out in the middle of the street, and look at the situation at the right, where people really have the right of way in this part of the city. This is the Pushkin Square, where over the years a lot of garbage or advertisements have moved in, and it was completely impossible to enjoy the space or to use the space. Now it's, as is by miracle, it's been completely turned around. You have street trees, you have granite sidewalk, granite paving, you have a cafe, you can see the metro station, and all the advertisement has come under control. Many, many things have happened in Moscow, and very, very quickly they've happened. And when I was there last time, that was in 2018, some people came up to me and say, hey, now we've got a new problem and it's your fault. We've got a Moscow baby boom. the fact that you put up all these benches and made all these spaces where people could have a good time, that has been resulting in having a baby boom. And tell you something, I'm very proud if I can, with my humanistic city planning, give Moscow a problem of a baby boom. That is quite a nice thing to think about. The last city I'll tell about is my home city of Copenhagen. They have been one of the first to humanize the city, and they have come furthest of all of them. It all started in 1962, that is 59 years ago, where they pushed the traffic out of the main street and turned it over to pedestrians. That everybody thought it would not work because it was too cold in Denmark and people were not used to urban life, but it was a great success, and gradually more and more spaces were turned over to people. Copenhagen was completely full of cars, as so many other cities. But one by one, the cars have been removed from the squares, and they have been turned over to people use. All along the waterfront in Copenhagen, there were parking where the cars could have a jolly good time resting and looking at the water. All these edges of the city have now gradually been turned into people spaces. There is a very important reason why Copenhagen has reached so many good results. We have a saying that what you count, you care for. And in one city after the, in one city after the other, they count all the cars, they know everything about the traffic, but they know nothing about the people who use the city. Copenhagen became the first city in the world where the life in the city was studied and documented just as carefully as you document in many places the traffic and the cars. This was done by the university, by the School of Architecture. It was done as research, but the city soon realized it was very useful, and the city and this university have worked together for a long period, but now the city has taken over, and the city life and the people in the city are now being documented just as carefully as was always the case with the cars. You know that nearly all cities I know of, they have a department for traffic. But do you know of any city who has a department for the pedestrian and public life? And all the cities have data concerning traffic and parking. But hardly any city has statistics and data concerning the people. But remember that what you count, you care for. So wherever you are, start to document the life as well as the traffic engineers document the parking and the traffic. In Copenhagen, we've seen a fantastic development of the spaces which are available for people. And of course, when you see such a development, it becomes more and more complicated to drive with a car. And then all the streets which are not red are almost all of them used more or less as if they were people's streets, because there are very little traffic. Copenhagen also has a strategy, we'll be the best city in the world for people, and they follow this strategy and they check with intervals, are we improving as we decided to do 10 years ago? Here are examples of this policy. It's not about making only the city center very nice for people, but making the whole city much better. And all the streets in Copenhagen now have been transformed. They used to be 4 or 5 lanes. Now they only have 2 lanes, 1 each way. They have a median for resting when you cross the streets. They have street trees, they have bicycle lanes, they have sidewalks. And the lower street is much more beautiful, it's much more safe, and very interestingly, it can take the same amount of cars and traffic as could the old street, but so much better it has become. Also, they have another principle, that's what we call the continuous sidewalk program, that there's nothing written in the United Nations human rights about that sidewalk should be interrupted when you have a street. You could just as well interrupt the street. And that is being practiced, that sidewalks are being carried through, bicycle lanes are carried through, and the cars have to wait until there are no people walking or bicycling. This is very good, especially for my grandchild, who is 7, who can now walk all the way to school on the sidewalk. It is safe. And now you can walk from your main door, your front door, to the school door. You can stay on the sidewalk all the time, and you doesn't have to be accompanied by your mother or driven to the school. That is great for the freedom of the young people. Also in Copenhagen, they have a fantastic program for bicycling. They have by now a complete citywide network of good bicycle lanes, which have curb to the traffic and curb to the sidewalk, and many of them are quite wide. And that has meant that we now have an alternative transportation system where you can bike with everything. You can, 1/3 of the Copenhagen families have a cargo bike where they can take their children to sports and to kindergarten and whatever. To have a good system for bicycle, you need to integrate it with the public transportation system. In Copenhagen, you can take your bicycle for free in the city train. That means you can pedal a little bit, go by train a big distance, and then you can pedal again. And in this way, you can get from here to there without using automobiles. They also have this policy of making shortcuts for bicycles, bridges over the harbor and the rivers. And the idea is that it should always be easier to bicycle between 2 points in the city. It should be more convenient to bike than to take your car. What has happened in Copenhagen is that really a bicycle culture has been developed. Everybody bicycles. Businessmen, pregnant mothers, children. The royal family are found bicycling. In the kindergarten, they train the children when they're very old to bicycle, and the old people who cannot bike, but they're being biked around because it's believed that moving around in your old neighborhood and having wind in your hair, that is a human right, and it is a much popular activity. Also in Copenhagen, of course, they have a strategy: we will be the best city in the world for bicycling. What has happened in Copenhagen is that a fantastic culture of using the bicycle has evolved. We've seen that every year more and more people take to the bicycles. And when last counted, I think they've done some counts in 19 also, but in Corona time, it's been another story. Actually, there's been more bicycling than before. But in 2018, half of everybody commuting to work or to studies were bicycling. 10 years ago, it was 38%. So what we have found and proved in Copenhagen is that you get what you invite for. If you make more streets and more freeways, what do you get? You get more traffic. But if you give good invitations for people to walk, for public life and for bicycling, then you will have more walking, more public life, and more bicycling, and you will have a much more people-friendly, sustainable, and healthy city, and a city which is good to be young in and old in. So in conclusion, I would say, make people cities your first priority. That is the simplest and that's the cheapest you can do in a city. There's no infrastructure as cheap and simple as infrastructure for walking and bicycling. And it creates right away a better city for everyone. All generations will have better times. And it is a city which is so cheap and easy to do that you can just start in all parts of the world to make more people-oriented cities. And finally, you can start tomorrow. You can go right into it and you can achieve results rather quickly. If you want to read more about this, I'm so happy that my books are all over the place, and they are now also in Turkey. And I can just tell you in Turkey that all your neighbors are already reading the books. They are reading it in Bulgaria, in Greek, in Russia, in Iran, and they even have the version in Arabic. And now we also have version in Turkish. And I look very much forward to see that you remember to read it. And with this, I will thank for me and go back to the common screen. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Jan Gehl, for this lovely sharing. You have shared your valuable experience with us by taking us through many cities. And I like to tell you that bicycling is at a stage of good attempt in some parts of Istanbul. There is
Okay.
it is being tried, at least. You know, Istanbul is not a flat city. It makes bicycling hard at times. Thank you very much for all this lovely experience sharing. Now we can, I guess you will be answering a few questions. I expect some questions from the audience. How shall we put it? Any questions? This is the most classical way. Any questions?
Some questions in the chat, maybe.
Yeah. I know the existence of a former mayor in the audience, and my colleagues who are interested in similar topics. Hello, Man.
I don't know who is it, whom you're speaking about.
I guess you got it. Jan, Man is a former mayor of Aleppo. Maybe he has a few words. He can join in.
A mayor of where? From where?
Aleppo.
Aleppo in Syria.
In Syria.
Yes.
And at that time, I didn't know you that well, but we did some nice spaces for people more than for cars. But I'm really very honored to be one of the audience of a presence of a great urban designer like you. For me, you are personally, I admire all your works, and I didn't know that Times Square is done by by you. This is an addition. In Amman, I personally experienced this space is really wonderful. But the books are also a classic for me for urban designer, even I'm to the point that I have a lecture in an elective course that I give, urban space, is oriented towards how we study the public life, and mainly asking your 5 questions of how the people would interact with the space. And we applied that with the student to most of the public places in Istanbul. So I'm really speechless in front of you, and I have just one question for the interaction between the public spaces and the people. Normally, we ask 5 questions. It's what and how long, how many, where and who. And if we add a 6th one, maybe about the time, when, because in analyzing the spaces in Istanbul, we find that time is really crucial in defining the interaction between space and people, or place and people. So could we add a sixth question, or 5 questions are enough?
I think that when is a very good question. So we add that one. Let's do it.
Okay, good. Then I will add it in the assignment is soon, in
Okay.
next month. So I will add this 6th question.
Now the students are warned.
So I got the approval from you. This is very good.
Yeah, my blessing.
Okay, so I'm adding it. When? Good, very good. I'm really very honored. I mean, speechless. No, not knowing really what to do, but really, really very honored to be here with the and thanks to the university, and thanks to Umran Hoca in particular to host a personality like you. Thank you very much.
Welcome, welcome.
I also extend my warmest thanks to Jan once again, and to you, Man, for your valuable contributions. And my dear colleagues, dear students, any more questions?
There was a question in the chat box. Abdullah asked, can you explain how to prove identity in public squares?
How to prove identity?
Yes.
Oh my dear.
Probably about how to analyze, I'm thinking.
Yeah. We have, you may know, we have another book, which is after this one, Cities for People. The next book was called How to Study Public Life. And I think, Man, it sounded as if you knew that book, because
So I know all the books, and specifically
and
this.
I could mention this book, How to Study Public Life, because there one can get a number of ideas for various things of value to study while you are out there being interested in making better public spaces. So your name was
the question came from
your name was Abdullah, and I think you should go to the library and get hold of that book, How to Study Public Spaces, and your answer to your question will be found there, I hope.
Thank you. Any other questions? Or shall we prompt some people? When we had our previous talks with Jan, I told him that he has an intrinsic Mediterranean inside himself, although he comes from the north. What about my Mediterranean friend, Karin? Do you have any questions, or do you like to contribute with a few sentences? Karin Hoffert comes from ETSAP, Barcelona.
Yeah, it has been a really great pleasure to listen to your lecture. I enjoyed it, and what shall I say, that I believe in the same credo that you.
Excellent.
So I cannot add anything, just that also my town struggles heavily to be more human. No, it probably never had the huge difficulties that some other towns have because of their size or because of other reasons. No, but still there is a lot to improve, and it's always nice to hear that let's say the ones who know most about believe the same as you do. So it reinforces, no, our task. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, Karen, for your contribution and being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
And students, more questions?
We have a raised hand, Alara.
Alara, okay.
Hello, by the way, thanks for this beautiful experience. I want to ask you a question. You mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that people tend to gravitate towards to the edges. How can we support these large public spaces to be alive when we're designing a large public space? Because people instinctively show the behavior of going to the edges that is more like semi-closed areas that are safer.
I am afraid that the noise replications, the reproduction was not very good. Could you repeat a little bit slower the main part of your question?
Okay. Okay, sure. You mentioned that at the beginning of your presentation, that people tend to gravitate towards to the edges, not the actually middle of the large public space, but more to the edges. So how can we support these big public spaces more active when we design the any space? Because I mean, people instinctively show the behavior of going to the edges, not the middle of a space, I mean.
Of course, it's something about, there are various situations and there are various purpose of public space. If it's a very big demonstration, the whole space is full of people and there's no need to go out to the edge because you're in good company in the middle of the space with the other people. If it's an early morning when there are not so many and you have to wait for a while, you go out to the edge. So it's about the situation, how many people there are, what the climate is like, what the day is like. But you start, my friend Alara, start to look for yourself when you get around to see the enormous importance of the edges of the city. Christopher Alexander would say, if the edge is not lively, the city will never become lively. And there's so much evidence that detailing the edges of streets and spaces of all sizes is very important for the functionality, for the quality of the spaces. So Alara, look for yourself and tell me later on what you found out. You may find some completely new things because all these things are not so much studied yet. There are so many things to study further to make better cities.
Okay, thank you so much.
That is Alara. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alara. And any more questions?
We have some questions in the chat box. I can read. Tarek asked, how can we apply such values in a Gulf country with hot climate?
Yeah. As far as I know, even if they're hot climate, there are nice evenings, and it is hot in certain parts of the day and certain parts of the year, but in other parts of the year and other parts of the days, the climate is quite comfortable. And also, say, from Singapore, I've noticed, of course, that if you have a good cover of trees, it could be very comfortable under the trees and in the shade. So in every climate, even in Greenland, where there are ice and snow, you can find that people find out how to get comfortable situation because they have sidewalk cafes in Greenland. and they want also there to see what's going on, whatever. And so every place, being it in a very hot climate or in a very cold climate, they adapt, but they have worldwide the same interest in other people. That is very, very universal, and that is very characteristic of Homo sapiens. This Homo sapiens is a walking animal and a social animal. We will adapt and find ways.
Thank you. We also have another question in the chat box from Ruba. How hard is it to adopt the pedestrian strategy in cities that are not well developed or don't have the infrastructure? How would people be convinced to ditch cars and adopt this mentality?
I did mention, and I could also elaborate more, but I did mention that the cheapest you can do is to make good infrastructure for walking and for bicycling. And a mayor like the one from Bogota in Colombia, he would say that a very important part of having a better economy in my city of Bogota is to make the poor people more mobile, because they have no access to car anyway. And he also said that 20% go by car, but they get nearly all the investments. I want to make the investment for the 80% who doesn't go by car. So he made this policy of making better sidewalks, better bicycle lanes, and also having bus rapid transit, so that the people who has no car could easily go around to other parts of the city and go to work and go back quickly, so they should not be away from home. He also said that in these groups which have a bad economy, it's very important that the parents are home quickly so they can take care of their kids and make sure to run a good family and not sit in a rattling bus for 6 hours in a day and not being able to go out to work. So he said, put priority on walking and bicycling and public transportation. That's a good way of improving the economy of your city and your country. I think that's a very interesting philosophy. And I also think that he has made good results with this philosophy. It's the same philosophy applied in Curitiba in Brazil by Lerner, who was a mayor for many years. Jaime Lerner. Curitiba and Bogota and Medellin are interesting cities in South America where they've tried to tackle some of the problems of what to do in poorer cities. And I think that's very, very interesting to study that and to learn from that. But I'm not so much an expert in that part of the world. I know more about Greenland and Iceland and Scandinavia, Germany, and Australia.
Thank you. And Mine, do we have any more written questions?
No, no more in the chat box.
Okay, and we don't want to tire Jan more. If there are no more questions.
Dinner time is coming up.
Yeah, yes, time to eat, yes. And as a final sentence, I like to extend my thanks to the faculty administration, and on their behalf and on my own behalf, I like to express once more that we are honored to host you here at BAU Talks, Jan. And it's my very sincere wish that We hope to see you in Istanbul in a not too distant future. I hope our world heals sooner than we can expect. Thank you. Thank you so much. And last but not least, I have to extend my thanks to Zühranur, who has helped us so much in getting together. Zühranur, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Zühranur. I've stepped out of the harbor and I'm now sitting in my office and say goodbye. See you in Istanbul.
I think Mina has something to tell you, Jan. As the last word.
I just want to thank you for this stimulating presentation. It's been great having you with us. We have a little tradition here in ArchiDesign Talks. As Bahçeşehir University Faculty of Architecture and Design, we donate in our guest's name. A donation has been made in your name to SAY Foundation, helping underprivileged children for inequality in education. So thank you so much for all your time and effort.
Thank you for this very considerate donation. I'm very happy and pleased to hear about it. Thank you very much. And goodbye and au revoir. See you again.
Hope so, hopefully in a not too distant future. And dear guests, friends, colleagues, students, thank you very much to all of you. It was so lovely to get together. Thank you for coming in.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.